Today I want to tell you all about frying. What is frying? What is not frying? What happens when something fries? Do we have to always fry everything in deep oils? No. What happens in air fryer? How can we use our oven as a fryer? All these information is in this video. It's a new series that we have started. So if you like the series, please press like immediately so that the word spreads. What is frying? Frying is actually a kind of dehydration process. How does it work? For example, if we put some chips on oil, what happens is first we get to see the bubbles. Let's say in a potato, we have air and some water inside trapped. With the heat, first the water starts to boil and the air expands. These starts to bubbles, and when the water bubbles like expand, and when it comes to 100 degrees, it starts to evaporate. And that's why there is a fume which goes up when you put something inside. It's usually the air and the water evaporating. And then what happens? Around the cells, the water gets away, the air gets away, and it's filled usually with some oil. Then that oil increases the heat to higher degrees and it creates the crunch and the niceness. At the same time, also creating a sear, which makes and keeps the crunch. We can steam. We can boil, but usually they are not as tasty as frying. Because what happens in frying is there are two other things that goes at the same time. These are two reactions. One is Maillard reaction. It's the browning of the meat. If you think it starts to take place at 140 degrees and increases the taste a lot. And the second is caramelization process, which takes place in around 165 degrees Celsius. And that's turning the sugar into brown tasty thing. And two of those things can happen while you are frying. Why can't that happen in steaming and boiling? Because the boiling degrees of water is what? 100 degrees, and it cannot go higher than 100 degrees, and those processes cannot take place. The water in whatever we're trying to fry sometimes works as an advantage, sometimes works as a disadvantage. For example, if we are making a pishi or a çiğ börek, this helps. Why? Because like the gluten in the dough is elastic, and when you're trying to fry it, the water starts to become vapor and it expands, making whatever we are trying to fry even bigger. Gluten works like a coating of the balloon, but sometimes it's a pain in everywhere. For example, if you're making chips, you sear the outside, but inside the water is trapped. So you take a crunchy, incredibly tasting fry out, and then 10 minutes later, it's soft and it goes like this, and you start to swear on yourself. Like if we are gonna cook fries, there are old potatoes, new potatoes. Old potato sits for a while and is dehydrated on its own, where the new potato, which has the brighter skin, has a higher water content. So if you have a chance to choose what you want to fry, choose the drier option. I will tell you how you can make perfect fries a little later, but this is basically the water working. The idea of frying is kind of fearing because it's high in calorie. So deep frying is something we're trying to escape from. But first I want to tell you some basic rules in deep frying, because I want to make this as like a nice lesson and get all the ideas about how the oil works, and then move on to less frying or just frying half a kilo of chips with 2 tablespoons of oil. But first, some rules on deep frying. The pan or the pot. The oil that you put in the pan or the pot should be as high as the thing that you want to fry. Secondly, never crowd the pan. If it's too crowded, usually what happens is the degrees of the oil really falls down, or the eye of the stove is not strong enough, so the water starts to mix before it seals and it becomes a mess. So if you want to fry, let's say eggplants, just don't fry them in one batch, fry them in 2 or 3 batches. Believe me, it's not gonna take longer, it's gonna take great timing. Third, if it's a pan, never put the handle in front of you, move it away from the place where you are working. You won't hit the handle because oil is gonna be at least 160 degrees, and oil burning is much worse than water burning. So, basic rules. The preparation, the water content of the thing that we want to fry, if it's higher, it's gonna take longer and it's gonna be harder to make it crunchy. The drier, the better.
Hi everyone, we are on Amazon. You can find our most highlighted products on Amazon and buy with just one click.
So, after we wash everything, we should dry our stuff. Sometimes after chopping, some water again is taken out, so dry everything. Secondly, chop everything almost to the same size. Different than boiling and steaming, because of the calorie in the oil, cooks the food much faster. Variant sizes means some of the things are gonna cook much faster than the other ones. So cutting everything in similar size is very important. When starting to fry, how can we understand the heat of the oil is right? The first thing you can do, whatever you want to fry, put it on a pan, but don't put it from the beginning. If you put it from the beginning, it starts to heat up together, so we don't want that. You think that it's around done, throw it. If the bubble starts to form immediately, it's good. Or you can take a wooden spatula and dip the end. If it starts to bubble around, if the water in this starts to get out, that's also something that we want. If you dip it and nothing happens for, let's say 30 seconds and then happens, then the oil is not hot enough yet. It has to be almost immediately. If you are frying with something with a batter, another way to understand whether the heat is right, put a drop of batter in the oil. If the oil goes to the bottom and then immediately bounces to the middle, then the oil is ready. If it goes down to the bottom, sticks to the bottom for a while, it can be 10-15 seconds or even longer, and then goes up, then the heat is not ready. It's still cold. Or if the bubble goes on and immediately when it hits the oil could go a little down and then starts to float on the surface, then the heat is too much. In köfte or çiğ börek, the water is good, the moist is good. But in fry, it's harder because the water can be trapped in the steel, and as it goes on, like when we take it out, 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, the moist goes out to the crunchy area and the water as well, making it less crunchy and kind of boring. To prevent that, what can we do? Two things. We can first boil the ingredients. Boiling will take the excess water away, and when you boil for 10 minutes, let's say, and take it out, it's as if we are just getting out of a hammam. With the heat, all the water content around evaporates, making it less moist. Second thing is frying twice actually, and the frying twice method is first taking the moist away. In fries, I want to tell you longer, but first frying is cold frying to 110 to 120 degrees for 6 to 8 minutes. The color doesn't change, the inside starts to cook a bit but not so much, and in the oil the potato gets the extra moist out. Then you cool it totally again with the help of the air, and then you fry it again. Then the outside is crunchy and inside is creamy. That's something that you can do, double frying in moisty stuff. And normally when we say we are frying and the heat is ready, that bubbling in the spatula happens in around 160 to 170, 180 degrees. And it's really quite hot. While we're putting the stuff inside, we don't want driplets, because each driplet would be a spot on the hand for a month. If it goes to the face, once it went into my eye and it was so bad for so long, and we don't want that. So how can we prevent it? In several ways. ChatGPT translate this as slotted spoon. I would call it colander. Put the thing that you want to put in with this, and then slowly put it in the oil. If you wash this and it's not dry yet, water would be trapped inside. If you dip this in, it would be really, really dangerous. So be careful. It has to be totally dry. Otherwise, it will like bam, 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 explode. Secondly, don't overcrowd the pan. When you overcrowd the pan, you lower the heat, and then the stove might not be as powerful for it to heat up. It will soak a little bit more oil. Secondly, it might take its water out to the oil, making more bam bam voice, making it even more dangerous and making the stove a mess. We put, let's say, a lot of mushrooms in a big pan. What happens? Mushrooms is filled with a lot of water, and the heat is not enough for it to sear. And because it cannot sear, it starts to go and takes the water out. Instead of frying, we have the mushrooms starting to first boil. If we let the pan heat long time, the water will evaporate and eventually it will start to fry again and have a nice tasty mushroom. But what is the difference? In the first one, if we don't crowd and put the mushrooms, the water of the mushroom is stuck inside and we have the juicy and fluffy mushrooms outside, nice and tasty and brown. In the second option, we have nice and tasty brown mushroom on the outside, but inside it's gonna be drier. I call it like a belt. Chewy and less fluffy, same in almost all the meats, so don't crowd the pan. Sometimes until the heat, we call this collect itself again, comes back to its normal heat, the things that you put inside might start to stick to one another. So that's something we don't like. Both things are not so great. When we want to take things out of the oil, first of all, again, the slotted spoon, we take it out. In the first 3 to 4 seconds is really important. It's the time that the ingredient soaks the most oil. So what we should do after we take it out of the oil, we have to minimize the time and the amount of oil that is still in the contact with the ingredients. And to do that, the best way I've found, take the slotted spoon out, have few seconds of back and forth movement. This way the excess oil is gonna drip and you're gonna make whatever you fried a little colder faster. And then put it on a colander or some paper, but do not overcrowd it. When you overcrowd stuff in a colander or something, it cannot go cold. And if it cannot go cold, some moist gets created and the crunchiness goes away immediately. You might say, okay, well, you don't do it, but yesterday even our Furkan did this, even though I told it for 100 times. Sometimes we do it, guys. Don't do it. Then it's time to sprinkle the salt, or you want to have a sauce. That's the time when all the cracks and all the pores are still open. If you have the salt, it might melt a bit. If it's a sauce, it will get in, and it's the greatest time to manipulate what you have cooked. So let's move into shallow frying. The shallow frying is a little less oil while we are frying. Usually it's a pan, and the pan you choose and the eye of the stove that you choose should match. Like if the eye of the stove is small and the pan is big, that's not good. Ideally, the size and the pan is almost same with the flames. We can lower the heat, higher the heat, relate to that, but if it's to make it more equal, the eye of the stove and the size of the pan should match. What I do for it to not to stick is first I heat the pan a bit without putting the oil. Why? Because think of the bottom of the pan as like bumps and surfaces like this. If it's a non-stick, it might be a little easy, but don't use non-stick because many reasons, especially Teflon. In low oil or shallow frying, it's even worse. Anyways, what I do, because when we heat everything, it expands. So there are pores, and when it expands, it becomes like a flatter surface first. Then I put the oil so that the oil again helps as another coating. When we put the oil cold, the oil gets around these places, and when it expands, it's not as smooth. I have this feeling and this experience in frying. So first heat the pan a bit and then add your oil. How can you understand that the oil is hot? The first time you put the oil, it becomes like heavier, it moves around a little slower. As the oil heats up, it becomes more runny. It starts to act faster, like water. When that happens, it's ready. If it starts to smoke, you should throw, unfortunately, the oil away, because smoking point means the oil is turning to something cancerogen, and we don't like that. Let's say you're frying something big, meat or börek or something. There's still oil, and while putting it in, you shouldn't directly put it. You should first put the side that is close to you and then put the rest away from you with a tongue or with hand. What happens is like the final moment when you let go of the thing, it might create a bit splash, and the splash is gonna go to your side, not my side. So that's something that is essential and simple, and it works all the time. While it's on the pan, don't turn it all the time. First, let it brown and change color or caramelize or have the Maillard reaction take place first, and then turn it. This is really important for it to seal first, and secondly, for the taste. Let's move to the good old oven frying. If it's the chips, what we do is we boil the chips for a while and then take the heat off, and then first the oil, let it heat a bit, and then put the chips and mix it well and put it as close as to the resistance, and then it starts to fry. The basic rule on frying: if it's moist, pre-boil. If it's not, take it to the highest heat, which is in this case 280 degrees. Put it on either the rack or the tray, but closest to the resistance on the top with a bit of oil, and make sure that everywhere around is covered with oil, because what is air? Air is light. Air has no calorie. Even though it's 280 degrees inside, for the thing to come into frying degrees, which is over 100 degrees, is harder. The poor air comes in, oh, it's cold, suddenly gets cold. So the circulation should be really well. So the fan in the middle should also work. So resistance and fan make the hot air goes around and helps it to cook. A question. Think of a whole chicken. Can be boiled, can be put into pressure cooker, can be put into the oven, and can be put into deep frying. Ideally, deep frying the whole chicken is a nightmare. But which one is gonna cook the fastest?
I would say pressure cooker, but if you're asking this question during explaining the frying, the answer must be frying.
Okay, this is how she got through the exams. You're right. In boiling, it's 100 degrees, so it takes about 120 minutes. If it's pressure cooker increases the pressure, highering the boiling temperature to 120 to 25 degrees of the water. So the cooking time is halved around 60 minutes, but still a lot. In the oven, yes, it's 250 degrees, 260 degrees. Air can go around, but because it's not as strong, it would take 90 minutes to cook, even though the heat seems like higher, but it doesn't work that way. The frying oil has a calorie. What is calorie, Burak?
Calorie is the energy that we need to increase its temperature for 1 Celsius.
Something like a phenomena.
Calories, energy.
In oil, because it's so much calories, it's the potential energy that is captured inside is really high. So once it sticks to you, once it becomes a frying thing, oh my God, a lot of energy is surrounding the thing that we are trying to cook. So something that might be like fun to remember. While in the oven, it's really, really, really important for the outside to be coated with oil. But what happens, like you put it in and inside, then you suddenly can see some parts are browning, some parts are not. What happens? As we said at the beginning, frying is a dehydration process, so water starts to evaporate. In some places it's faster, some places not. So when water is trying to get out, it pushes the oil away around the surrounding, and we don't have that much of oil to be everywhere. So time to time we should open the oven, and that's why we should, move it a bit, so that this time by mixing, stirring, we are sure that the outside is coated with oil, because the heat heats up the oil, increases the degrees. That's how the frying, the increasing of the temperature occurs. If the oil was not there, we were limited to water, which is 100 degrees. Now let's move to our friend Mrs. Air Fryer.
Why Mrs.?
Doesn't she look like me?
She's married to who?
Life. It's actually almost the same thing in the oven, but everything is crushed into a small space. Normally, when we move to the oven, how the oven works, first the resistance from the bottom, the top, and from the middle around the fan starts to heat. It has to heat up everywhere, all the enamelware around and the walls. First it has to heat a lot of space, then it can heat the cake that we put inside. And a lot of space is big, and a lot of space is iron, which needs a lot of energy to heat up. Instead, here we have a smaller space like this. Materials are usually lighter, so it heats up fast. So it doesn't need preheating. And the resistance is here, and the fan is like thick around here. That big of a fan is almost the size of the thing that we want to fry. Resistance is very close, and the fan is too big, and the space is small. So everything happens faster. Almost similar to deep frying. Why in deep frying everywhere is around is oil, and the heat is there. But instead of putting that much oil, we coat it with oil, but we make sure the blowing of the heat is fast and continuous and is concentrated, and no one can escape anywhere. So the frying is fast. Other than the deep frying, the fastest way to fry would be the air fryer. Guys, I wanted to continue on frying with better coating like the schnitzels, plain frying with flour, Turkish frying techniques, the incredible tomato sauce that we do with frying, the incredible yogurt sauce, all the things that I want to talk about frying. But already I have been talking about over an hour, so I'm not sure the video is short enough to add these. So this is episode 1. If you want this to continue, you know what to do. Please say your emotions, say what you think about, and say the other things that you want me to include in the video. I'm going to do it. And this is a new series I want to try. It's like the cooking school, information on basic cooking techniques. If you have enjoyed it, please say so. I have worn my white coat for you guys. If you like the series, if you like the idea, please share with me. Take care.